Before the white man set foot in Australia, my ancestors were kings in their own right, and I, Aboriginal Chief Burraga, am a direct descendant of the royal line. The black man sticks to his brother and always keeps the rules which were laid down before the white man put foot upon these shores. One of the greatest laws amongst the Aboriginals was to love one another, and they always kept to them laws. Where will you find a white man or a white woman today that will say, I love my neighbor? It quite amuses me to hear the people saying, I don't like the black man, but he's damn glad to live in a black man's country all the same. I'm calling a corroboree of all the natives of New South Wales to send a petition to the King in an endeavour to improve our conditions. All the black man wants is representation in federal parliament. There is also plenty fish in the river for us all, and land to grow all we want. 150 years ago, the Aboriginals owned Australia, and today he demands more than the white man's charity. He wants the right to live.
I was born in Crown Street Women's Hospital in Surrey Hills in 1960, but I grew up on the Aboriginal Reserve at La Perouse. King Burraga's words back in 1933 are still very relevant today. Of course, to this very day now, we have what you call the Uluru Statement, which the new government, which is the new Labor government in Canberra, will implement in full. My uncle, King Burraga, that's my grandmother's brother, his words are still very relevant today because that's what is actually stated in the Uluru Statement, that we need federal representation in Parliament, exactly the way that he said it way back in 1933. I also think it was very rare, for an Aboriginal person to, be filmed like that. So it was very unique for that time, because you have to remember those times were very dangerous for Aboriginal people. The Aboriginal Protection Board and Welfare Board, which later became a branch of the Protection Board, were making observations of Aboriginal people all the time. And anyone who spoke out against the authorities, could have easily been, punished for doing that. So it was quite brave of him, to speak out publicly in that way and be filmed. But they took their chances, and the reason, Aboriginal people are where we are today is because of the efforts of people like, my uncle, King Burraga, and other Aboriginal people as well, right across the state and the country. So there was Aboriginal people speaking out, everywhere. So he lived in Herne Bay. His name was Bert Groves. And he became, very politically active and organised. So there was an organisation called Fakatsi, and he ran a branch of it from Saltpan Creek. And that branch was particularly a very effective one because of the way that they knew how to organise themselves, but also how to use the media as well. They used to make boomerangs, from the mangrove trees here. So they was very keen to also set up their own little businesses and enterprises. And they used to go down to the Domain in Sydney, to sell the boomerangs. But while they was down there, my uncle, King Burraga, would give his speeches down there as well. So they was politicising all the time, and pushing back against, the way that governments and their authorities were, trying to dominate us, So it wasn't a very pleasant time, I would say, because things really didn't ease until, in the 60s when I was born, So it was a fight for survival.
Yeah, my name's Terry Lennis, local Aboriginal elder, born in Panania, 1968. I'd probably say I was the result of that referendum and, 9 months later, here I am, so to speak. So I probably would have been one of the very first Aboriginal people born as a human being in their own country. My parents moved from Herne Bay to Panania in 65, 66. And that because they'd just changed the name Herne Bay to Riverwood. I was actually the only Aboriginal student that attended East Hills Boys High School and Picnic Point High School in the early 1980s. So it was really difficult. When my father passed away when I was 13, we moved back to the house at Panania. Then where do I finish up? 7 miles from where I was born. I live in Bexley North, back down in the Bardwell Valley. So, you can take the boy out of the home, but you can't take the home out of the boy. It was great times as a kid, but the school times were not so fun. Home. Lots of memories, lots of just crazy times with my mates. Friday afternoon after school, then going down across the river and just sitting down beside the river with a fire and catching jewfish, and 2 to 3 feet long, or anything from 60 centimetres to a metre long, and being able to go back and cook them for the weekend. Being able to swim in the Georges River, having to deny my own Aboriginality due to my parents saying, whatever you do, do not let people know that you are Aboriginal. So I thought, well, I'm actually going to take your education and I'm going to utilise it and I'm going to prove you wrong. Yeah, it was just a lot simpler times, It's these days everything seems to be more rush, and everybody seems to have stepped away from nature, so they don't seem to be able to relate to each other just as well as we used to. So that's one of the things I do miss. Jumping off East Hills footbridge at high tide. Those words mean actually a real lot to me for the simple reason it was the start of the voice saying that, hey, listen, we are people too. There is only one race on the planet, and that's the human race, and not judge a book by its cover. Look what's inside, not the outside. Then I reckon we'll start to really get along a lot better on this planet.
My name now is Carol Joy Brown. I'm a proud Biripi woman, born and raised in Revesby. I am known in this area as Auntie Carol Brown, so I'm blessed to be looked at as an auntie by all the beautiful students in the schools I work with in the area that I live. My mum birthed me herself. I was born in an ambulance on the way to Canterbury Hospital. My mum knocked on the ambulance and said, pull over, she's here. And then I grew up. We were living at 78 Turvey Street, Revesby, on 5 acres they used to have there. Fun things when I was growing up. We were lucky, really lucky to live in a world without as much technology as we have now. So we walked everywhere. We'd walk to our girlfriends' places. We were in each other's neighbours' places. We were more community-minded and we were really there for each other. And we spent heaps of time down the Georges River. My dad was a professional fisherman from the mid-north coast. My mum was my Aboriginal side, and they moved to Sydney to, like most people, for work. There used to be caves along the river there too. And as a little girl, I remember going into those caves and sweeping the floor and setting up house. And I said to me, Mum, I'm staying here tonight. I got me till it got dark, and then you ran to the car. But we used to swim across the river and back. I think the sharks, we knew they were there, but you didn't think about it. You just, as a kid, you just do it. So when we were allowed to be Aboriginal in Australia, so many things in my life made sense. The connection to the rivers, the climbing trees. I've always been a tree hugger, but there's a real connection to land. And I see that, but I can go down to the river, and that water can connect me to my water at Port Macquarie. I didn't get the opportunity to learn a lot about my Aboriginal culture growing up because it was a very hard time. The Department of Education had that exclusion on demand policy. So in primary school, you never identified or talked about anything that would show you were Aboriginal. It's just a shame because I look back at my primary school photos and realise now how many Aboriginal students we had. And I'd love a school to revisit that one day. But it's so good you can be Aboriginal in Australia. King Burraga, fabulous story. And to watch him on that newsreel that went national and international. It's so powerful what he had to say. And we're having a school put in King Burraga's story into their mural, which that makes my heart sing. Because a lot of people all of a sudden think if you want to be an Aboriginal experience, we better get off to Uluru. It's all around us, everywhere. We're so rich with it in this area. And yeah, there's so much. We've got Red Hands Caves, the other side of the rivers, where the men waited for their women to give birth around the corner in the birthing pools, you know. And this is just, we're the youngest country on earth with the oldest living culture. Be accepting of everyone's differences and still realise that as Aboriginal people, we don't own the land owns us. And as I say to all the cultures when I talk at schools and things like that, we're all in this together. If you live on this land, it's part of your culture too. And don't see us as such separate entities. But everyone's welcome, look after the country and get to learn about the culture as we get to learn about other people's cultures, you know. It's all important for us to come together as one nation. If you find you have Aboriginal blood in you, be honoured and go on that journey and understand. Get excited about it, share your own culture and learn about ours.